And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Wednesday morning. IFR, north slope to the Arctic coast, coming southward there through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and down into the northern Bering Sea. And some more IFR here over the Atka Island area and toward the eastern Aleutians, and northward toward the Pribilof Islands. VFR, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, western interior, as well as much of the east side there, north of the Alaska Range. Marginal VFR for the Copper River Basin. IFR covering the Gulf of Alaska, extending up into the North Gulf Coast here and along the north coast of the Panhandle for the afternoon. That pretty much holds with north coast of the southeast coastal area, seeing some IFR. Marginal VFR over the inside waters. IFR right along the North Gulf Coast, and moisture spreading westward here, pushing marginal VFR in over much of south central Alaska into the Kuskokwim Valley and northwestward there toward the Yukon River. And IFR holds north slope in the Arctic coast, right through the Bering Strait into the northern Bering Sea here down to the Pribilof Islands. And marginal VFR, some areas of VFR for the Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Thursday morning, some IFR here sliding up along the south coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Next push of IFR way out there to the west, and still some IFR here over the northern Bering Sea, right across St. Lawrence Island, northern Seward Peninsula into Kotzebue and the northwest coast now, but pulling back to the north there, right along the Arctic coast, VFR in the interior, extending down into northern Cook Inlet, big area of IFR over the Gulf of Alaska. That area kind of shrinks here and is offshore everywhere with the IFR now over the eastern Gulf. Marginal VFR along the North Gulf Coast, southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, VFR in the interior. IFR back into the North Slope, Arctic coastal areas, and then down here along the west coast of the Pribilof Islands. And a big area of IFR spreading westward here as far east as Atka by the afternoon. Passes Anatuvik and Adigan. Both will be occasionally marginal tomorrow. Same thing for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR. Marginal for rainy, windy, and then back to IFR for Isabel. Mintesta, VFR. Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage looks marginal as well. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels, 8,000 feet over the east side of the state, about 4,000 feet down across the southeast coast. And then this big swath of colder air here out over the Bering Sea from the Arctic there all the way down south of the Alaska Peninsula, 2,000 feet here, then warming back up out to the west. And for icing, nothing of any significance over the Aleutians or Bering Sea or the western interior. Look for isolated moderate icing here for the southeast interior from the Kuskokwim Valley all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, into the Gulf of Alaska, and in across the southeast coast. And the jet stream, main jet way to the south here, 140 knots out of the southwest or even south of the Queen Charlotte Islands. Otherwise, there's some southerly winds here at the trough out over the Bering Sea. South-southeast winds about 60 knots over the western interior. Northerly winds 65 knots coming down across the west central Aleutians. 9,000 feet, north to south flow out here over the western Bering and into the Aleutians there with pretty light winds over the interior and the Gulf of Alaska from Bristol Bay eastward here. And then southwest, 35 to 40 knots for the southeast coast. 40 knot south winds along the north coast of the Panhandle tomorrow, extending up and turning east-southeast there near Yakutat. Light over the interior, and some northerly winds at about 40 knots cutting southward across the Bering Sea to the Aleutians. And turbulence, most significant area of turbulence would be the considerable moderate turbulence area here from the North Gulf Coast and the northern Panhandle.